Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Watching the Boxes Fantasy Basketball Podcast, hosted by #basketball.com, your home for the very best fantasy basketball tools and articles on the entire internet. #basketball.com. Go check them out. I am your host, Mike Catron, and joining me as always is a suspicious GM for some of these listener leagues. That is my co-host, Tyler Watts. What's up, Tyler?
Michael, sometimes it just hurts to get beat, doesn't it?
It's a little suspicious that suddenly you're up by one single point in the Dynasty League right now in our epic battle in this first round of the playoffs.
Our epic battle for supremacy, Michael?
I actually think whoever gets through the Tyler Mike Gauntlet, whoever beats who on the other side of that, they're going to beat the shit out of either one of us.
Well, I mean, why can we expect anything different? Listeners are supposed to win the listener league, Mike. That's how it works.
That's true. The listeners are yet to win a listener league, so it would be appropriate if they did finally win a listener league this year. We could finally give away our prize. Shout out to our listeners in the listener leagues, our Patreons who are subscribing at patreon.com/watchingtheboxes, supporting the show. It's been a really, really good year. The listener leagues are pretty tight right now. Even the second chance league is basically the top six guys, or the sixth place guys, 7.5 games back. So yeah, tight league.
Indeed. You know who's going to win this Dynasty League, don't you?
Me, I would assume.
No, definitely not. It is going to be our man Joey. He's going to take this thing down.
Is he currently leading the other side of the playoffs here?
Indeed, he is.
Wow. He could do it. So shout out to #basketball Joey. I think you can find him at #basketball.
Indeed, you can.
At least that is the official Twitter of #basketball.com. A very generous sponsor throughout the last few years. So shout out to #basketball.com and shout out to Joey. He's gonna. I'd like to see how his reaction to the prize that he gets. We might have him on the show if he ends up winning. See how he feels about his prize.
He's gonna love his prize, Mike. Now, come on, don't hate.
I would assume, but it's still a secret. Yeah, Tyler, where's the time gone? It's week 21. Can you believe it? I can't believe it's already week 21.
Yeah, I mean, it's playoff time, right? I mean, pretty much every league, the playoffs are getting started here. Either, maybe they started last week, maybe they start this week. There is a chance that some people hold off until week 22, but not many, right? Most of the playoffs are going to start in week 21. So, obviously, in a head-to-head league, this becomes the most important week of the season, right? Because you got to advance in the first round to play in the second round. So, you know what I mean? You got to obviously be locked in all week and be monitoring those injuries and shutdowns and Anthony Davis playing 20 minutes and all that crazy stuff that's going to go down in the NBA this week. When we're looking at the schedule, right, and actually it's the exact same schedule for week 21 and week 22, which is weird. Okay, 10 teams play 4 games, 2 teams play twice, and the other 18 teams play 3 times. It's the exact same breakdown in week 21 and week 22.
That's very strange, actually. I'm very surprised by that.
So there is that, right? Obviously, the 2-game teams this week, and there are 2 different teams next week, but the 2-game teams this week are Cleveland and the Clippers. I would not play anyone from either team if I was in a weekly lock league.
I would agree.
I would sit all those guys, and I would try to replace those options like your Lou Williams, those type of guys, with guys playing 4 games. And there's 10 teams playing 4 games, and there's plenty of options that are very readily available on waiver wires that you could add and use depending on what categories you need. I will say this. This is maybe the most important part of winning a playoff matchup that some people don't do. You got to know what you're good at and what the guy you're playing is good at. And maybe you can't just look at the season-long standings because maybe he made a trade last week where he traded, I don't know, 2 of his big man for a guard. So now maybe he's good in assists and not so good in rebounds as he was all season long. That stuff is important because, especially in a weekly lock league, I'm going to pick up the guys for the categories I need to beat him in to win the matchup. If I've already got assists locked down by 50 assists, I'm not going to pick up a point guard type. I'm going to pick up a big man so I can win rebounds and blocks and win 2 more categories.
Yeah, you got to know what you're good at. You got to know what your opponent's good at. And that's a good point. Just going to the overall standings and seeing, oh, man, this guy's number 1 in blocks. Man, he's going to kill me in blocks. I'm not very good. I'm going to ignore that. Well, there's a reason this guy's in the playoffs. He probably made some trades there during the year and up to maybe even recently up close to the deadline that got rid of some of his block players because he knew he didn't need to destroy everybody in blocks every week. And now his blocks are actually you could compete with them in blocks. But if you decide to throw your blocks at the beginning of the week without doing a little bit of extra research into who you're going up against, you might have just cost yourself a playoff.
Yeah, so, I mean, and it's super easy to do. You can just get in Excel and kind of throw all his guys in there with their current, per game averages. And even that's a little dicey, right? Because guys ride hot streaks, guys ride cold streaks. But as long as it's a guy who hasn't been traded or anything, throwing his season-long averages in there are pretty safe bets for what he's going to produce this week. And you can just add all the categories together, add all your categories together, see where it shakes out, see where it's going to be. I know, right? Well, Mike and I are playing in a matchup in the playoffs this week, and we were just discussing there's 2 categories that are basically going to make the matchup. So obviously I'm going to try to beat Mike in those 2 categories, and he's going to try to beat me, and we're going to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, it's rebounds and steals, actually. I'm pretty good at steals. You're also good. You're really good at rebounds, and somehow I'm competing in rebounds with you. And there's a lot of factors for that. You got some guys who didn't play as well. You got some guys who didn't play hurt. Maybe I had a couple guys who had some really good games. You're gonna have to pivot almost day to day. So sometimes, if you're in a weekly league, hey, you got to set your lineup. You got to set your lineup. But if you're in a daily head-to-head league, where you can adjust your rosters every single day, sometimes during the year you can check your roster Monday, check your roster Thursday, check your roster Saturday, whatever. You maybe you see somebody gets injured on your team, you go out and you switch it up. Nah, this is playoff time. Every single day you need to be checking your scoring, checking what you're competing in. And maybe you didn't think you were going to be competing in a category, but you are now. Make the decision, make the to pick up guys off the waiver wires who will help you compete. And do not, I can't stress this enough, do not be afraid to go all in. You might have to drop somebody who is a startable player, but if it wins you that week, it's all worth it because it's win or go home at this point, Tyler.
Yeah, and especially when we get down to Saturday and Sunday, if maybe you have somebody who's not playing at all on Saturday or Sunday, right? And actually this week those teams would be Minnesota, right? Minnesota does not play at all on – oh, no, I'm sorry. Wrong. Looking at the wrong day. Every team plays at least one day, either Saturday or Sunday. But, maybe looking on Friday, you're looking at a team like the Thunder who only have 1 game left. Or you could pick up somebody off the waiver wire that's got 2 games, and there's plenty of teams that play twice between Friday and Sunday. You know what I mean? Like, I might drop somebody who's fairly good to get 2 games out of a lesser player because in most cases, 2 games are always going to be better than 1.
Yeah, unless you're talking about a top, 15, 20 player, 2 games are often better than 1, depending on the, the depth of your waiver wire. If it's if you're in a very large, deep league, then maybe not. Actually, that 1 game might be better than a guy who actually will play, 14 minutes over those 2 games.
I'll throw you out 4 guys that I guarantee are going to decide some matchups this week, and It's because they have a Saturday, Sunday back-to-back.
Oh, all right. Let me hear it.
Those 4 guys are going to be Kevin Knox and Emmanuel Mudiay for the Knicks, and Josh Jackson and Mikal Bridges for the Suns.
I am a big fan of we've been a big fan of Emmanuel Mudiay all year. And Mikal Bridges has been getting steals like a motherfucker out there. He's
2.4 steals a
killing
game
it.
over the last
Yeah.
30 days. That
So
is insanity.
So if he gets you 4 steals in the last 2 games, like, hey, that could be enough. And then actually in our league, Tyler, in our matchup, that would be enough right now because there is less than 4 steals between us. We are playing in a 2-week playoff, which I would highly recommend. It's probably a little late to change your settings now, but going into next year, I really like, after I've been playing all head-to-head all these years, I really like the 2-week playoff week. And that's when you have kind of like a shorter, maybe 4 or 6 teams in the playoffs. Maybe there's a bye or whatever. If you're in a bigger league and you want to have like 8 teams in the playoffs, 10 teams in the playoffs, I like having that first round maybe being a 1 week where it's kind of like a toss up, like anything can happen, and then the latter weeks being 2 weeks. If you don't want to start your playoffs like in January, which I think is absurd.
You know what I'm not a
some people
fan
do
of?
that.
I'm a big fan of the 2-week matchup myself, but I'm not a fan of 8 teams making the playoffs. Even in a deeper league.
Yeah, I'm not either. Who are these jokesters who are like 22 games back, but they're making the playoffs? It's called the Orlando Magic, who are currently in the playoffs right now. That's who they would be.
That's what I mean. Now if it's like a 30-team league, okay, I can see kind of maybe making it a bigger playoff, but I wouldn't recommend playing in a 30-team fantasy league. I don't think that's a lot of fun.
No, that's too many.
But even in a 16-team league, I kind of like the 4 teams making the playoffs in the sense that obviously, it makes it a little bit more, injuries are a little bit more dependent during the regular season. If one of your big name guys goes down, especially in a 16-team league, you can lose a lot of weeks and lose a lot of ground in the standings. But at the same time, like, there should really only be 4 teams that can win the championship. You shouldn't be like 500 for the season and then make the playoffs and reel through and win a championship because, I don't know, for example, Robin Lopez comes out of nowhere and you pick him up and he averages 16 points a game and 2 blocks like he's been over relatively the last month, and you win your matchup that way. I'm not a huge fan of that. So I
agree. I'm not a big fan of that. I think less people in the playoffs is better, but you want to make the league happy. Obviously, you want to do what's best for the fun of the league. So it's always good to take a consensus of the league. But you're right, Robin Lopez, really depressing. The Bulls have been winning quite a few games over the last few weeks. Robin Lopez on your list here as top 10 waiver wire pickups for week 21. Like you said, 17 points, 5 rebounds, almost 2 assists, and 2 blocks per game. He is on fire. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and that makes for an interesting topic that we could maybe discuss a little bit when looking for guys to pick up, whether it be for the entire week or maybe just for one game. Are you going to go for Robin Lopez type who could get a lot of minutes and production? Right, but we've also seen plenty of stretches this season where Robin Lopez is just out of the rotation. And this may be even more prevalent for New York Knicks players. I mean, we've seen guys like Noah Vonleh, right? He had that stretch where he was playing like 28, 30 minutes a game there for, a month, 2 months? And now he's back down to playing like around 20 minutes a game. So are you going to pick up kind of a boomer bust type, or are you going to go for a very much more consistent player? And the league has, numerous players like that where basically their stat line they get relatively every night and there's not much variance.
Well, so in a weekly lineup league, I'm going for, max games and I'm going for the consistent player. So that would be my go-to on a weekly, but on a daily roster changes, what I like to do is kind of the first, unless there's kind of like a weird discrepancy. So this week there's 7 games on Monday, 6 games on Tuesday, 10 games on Wednesday. So my roster is going to be pretty full most of those days. Maybe I'll throw one of my streams in on Tuesday, depending on what my setup is. I like to see what my roster is doing against my competition before using hardly any of my streams. That way, the second half of the week, I can decide to go boom or bust type of players who will win me a category. So if, let's just say half of my team plays insanely well and I'm killing it in points. Well, if I would have streamed points earlier in the week, I would have been a waste of streaming spots. So I like to wait till the end of the week before I dump in all my streamers. It's a little risky sometimes. You still want to play out the games. Like if there's 2 games, so you're going to get 2 games or 3 games out of the last 4 days. That's usually something to focus on. But I like to go boom or bust. I play the hot hand. It's just like roulette. You got to play the hot numbers. Play the hot hand. If you're going to play a guy for 1 game, go with the hottest guy in the league. If he craps the bed, you tried.
Yeah, and I'll mention another thing that I like to do is kind of play the matchups a little bit, especially early in the week, right? Like if I'm gonna use a pickup on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, right? I mean, whatever day my roster has spots, and only you're gonna know that, right? Because you mentioned there's a good amount of games on every day.
Yeah.
I'm gonna play the matchups, right? If I know a team is giving up a ton of points and playing at a really fast pace, I might stream a guy, against them who's a good scorer if I need points. Same thing happens in pretty much every category. There are certain teams that, the opponent blocks a lot of shots against. There's reasons for that. They drive to the basket a little more, you know what I mean? Like things like that. I might make a block stream in that type of day. And you got to balance it too with, knowing the player you're picking up a little bit. Like blocks are always a little bit of a fluky stat for any player because, maybe he gets in foul trouble real quick and can't block the shots.
Well, I mean, there's teams that are going to get feasted on, like the Suns, the Bulls, the Hawks, the Wizards. These teams are not good defensive teams. The scores run up in those games. Heck, even in the Warriors games, the Warriors are giving up 112 points per game for the opposition. So it's not just the bad teams. There's good teams that give up a lot of points as well. There are just also on the flip side of that, teams like the Pacers, the Miami Heat, and even the Grizzlies, where it's just like they grind it out still. They're still really good defensive teams. Like the Grizzlies are not a great team, but you're not going to get peak performance out of teams who are playing against good defensive teams, even if they are bad overall teams.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at a stat like pace, right, which, I mean, the higher the pace of the game, the more shot attempts there are going to be. So if you're looking at points, it's not all bad teams, and this is an important thing to remember. The Kings play at the fastest pace in the league, right? They're pushing to be a playoff team in the Western Conference. The Thunder are 3rd in pace. The Bucks are 6th. The 76ers are 7th. And the Warriors are in the top 10. So things like that definitely do matter, and you've got to be cognizant of those things when you're making your streams, right? Like you mentioned, I don't stream hardly anybody against the Grizzlies. Even if he's the best guy on the waiver wire, I'm like, man, what if the Grizzlies hold these guys to like 90 points tonight and there's like 0 shots from either team?
Yeah. It happens. Like 100% happens. Or you can get lucky and get a 4 overtime game.
I will mention this, and you won't see this if you look through like season-long stats. The Mavericks traded away a ton of their rebounding, and they are struggling to rebound the ball. So they played the Brooklyn Nets on Monday. If you got a guy from Brooklyn who you think is a good rebounder on your waiver wire, I would look at that the rest of the week because they are struggling to rebound the ball. Luka Doncic is averaging like 8 rebounds a game. Other than that, they are very struggling to get the rebounds.
I think one thing you're going to I think this bodes well for people going into the playoffs and at the end of the year. A lot of people complain about, people start sitting and the teams that are at the top are, they're just resting their players for the playoffs. And the last 2 weeks, nobody plays. Bullshit. Blah, 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 blah. That's obviously happens. It's going to happen this year. But I think we're all kind of in luck this year because this is a very weird, strange year. And the seedings in the playoffs right now, there's no real team who's kind of set where they are. There are basically 4 or 5 teams trying to get into the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, along with the fact that the Bucks and Toronto are going for that first spot. Pacers, 76ers, and Boston are all in the mix to switch their seats as well. And then you go to the West, and that's been, the West has been close from top to bottom almost the entire year. You're starting to see the cream rise. San Antonio and Sacramento, pretty much everybody else probably out of it. The Lakers are going to make a run because LeBron is LeBron. I will have a very hearty laugh when LeBron does not make the playoffs this year. That will make me feel good inside. But the rest of these teams, that are in the playoffs in the Western Conference are going to be trying to maneuver their way into better seeding. So I don't think you're going to see as much sitting this run up to the playoffs, this March into April, that you usually do.
Yeah, and I mean the flattening of the lottery odds disincentivizes some of those teams to lose every single game too, right? Because I mean, the difference between some of those spots is nothing. Literally, you have the exact same lottery odds to be first, and looking at them. So those teams really don't have to sit players now because they're not gaining ping pong balls, so to speak.
That's true. Though the Bulls do need to actually, I was looking at it, and even if the Bulls are outside of that top four worst teams, they still have a very good chance of ending up in the lottery. I think it's only like a 2% difference between. Yeah, I think that's right.
The lottery odds, if
2% difference.
If anyone wants to know, right, the three worst teams all have a 14% chance to get the number one pick. The big difference is if you're the absolute worst team, the worst you can be is fifth. The second team, the absolute worst you can be is sixth now, and if you are third, the absolute worst you can be is seventh. So they're actually picking 4 teams this year instead of 3. It was used to pick 3 in the past. Now they're picking 4 teams to move up.
Yeah, and that's very nice because like the Bulls right now, they're in the top 4. They got a 48% chance of being in the top 4. The top 3 worst teams, Phoenix, New York, and Cleveland, all have a 52% chance of being in the top 4. So it's really a 4% difference. That seems like maybe it seems like a lot to somebody, but that's not a huge difference. There's a pretty good chance the Bulls will end up with a top pick. But looking at this lottery, and we're going to talk about going into March Madness here, which is coming up really, really soon. The week into March Madness, we are going to do a preview of this rookie class, and I'm hoping we can get 30-40 minutes out of that, Tyler, because there's really seems to only be 2 really good players coming out of this draft, and a lot of people who are kind of big question marks.
Yeah, and how do I want to phrase this? There is a larger cluster of players that could all kind of go. Even when we're looking at that top 10, right? Like Zion Williamson is basically the number 1 consensus number 1 pick.
Yeah, for sure.
No matter where you look, even in that 2 through 5 range, right? You see all the same names usually, but those 4 get flopped around quite a bit. And then after that, there is a large cluster where I kind of think anybody could be in that 6 to 10 range. We're talking guys all the way back like to 20 or so. I mean, you saw Bull up there, in that top 5 range for a lot of the preseason. And now, like a lot of times he's going in the mid-teens because he got hurt. And there's a lot of players like that, right, that are just kind of all a little bit fungible there. So that'll be interesting. I'll throw out a quick name here, and we'll talk a lot more about this player who hasn't really played this year because he's hurt. It's Jonte Porter. He's actually the brother of Michael Porter Jr. I had him as a top 20 pick coming out in 2018, and he decided to stay in school, and then he got hurt. I think that could be a really interesting kid on a few teams. I'm going to be really interested to see where he goes. I would assume he's still going to be a first-round pick. That's a guy I really like.
Yeah. I mean, Tyler, you do a great article every year about these rookies coming into the league, what to look for in March Madness. And I'm going to tell you right now, everybody, John Moore and Zion Williams. That's all I care about. RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish will probably be pretty decent NBA players. Hell, Bull might come out of nowhere and get healthy. And I actually like Jarrett Culver a
Now,
little bit
see,
as
see,
well.
see, Bull. To me, he's a little bit like he's the in between of Giannis and Bruno Caboclo. Like
Uh-oh.
now we've really seen like some not very many games from him, right? I mean, he got hurt pretty early, so he's a little bit hard to get a read on. But like he's a very toolsy player with a lot of upside. So the team he goes to is going to matter a lot, I think, right? Because he's going to need a team where he can develop on. And I'm just going to say this right now, like to think he's going to be a big time NBA player next year is probably a mistake.
Oh yeah, definitely a
Like
mistake. I
even
think in
Giannis,
dynasty leagues, he's worth like, if you're you're a later pick. Like that says someone with potential, right? And I just did a mock draft simulation over at takeathon.com, my favorite place to figure out if the Bulls are going to get Zion Williamson. And Bull ended up going to the Spurs. Best case scenario, obviously.
yeah, but I mean the reason I made that comparison between those kind of three players is we heard Bruno Caboclo had this insane upside and he never really reached that potential. And even Giannis, right, who did clearly reach that potential, it took him 2 full seasons before he was really much.
Well,
And
yeah,
then
I actually I can remember that rookie year looked not great. That second year, you were like, okay, this guy is all right, but he's fantasy wise barely relevant. And I had a friend who was like, went all in on Giannis. Was like, I'm trading for Giannis. I want him on my team. I'm keeping him for the next like 5-6 years. It's probably the smartest move that guy ever made.
yeah, and so and we'll talk a ton more about these players, but there's some fun names in there, and there's some guys that yeah, I don't know, man. There's some guys I don't even in that top like 15-20 range where I'm not a huge fan. Now that's not to say that they won't be productive NBA players, but for fantasy, they're not going to be great talents.
I completely agree with that. I think it's going to be a weak draft. Outside of those top few guys. All right, let's talk about week 21. We've already talked about it a little bit. We talked about Robin Lopez. We talked about Mikal Bridges being a no-brainer, especially if you need steals. And then our friends on the Knicks, Moody and Knox, being someone who could swing a league a week, maybe week 21, if you play your cards right. But the number one guy on your list of top 10 waiver wire pickers for week 21 is once again someone I'm just shocked that it's only owned in the first guy and the last guy on your list. But the first guy on your list is Kevin Huerter on the Atlanta Hawks, owned in 13% of leagues. How is he only owned in 13% of leagues? That's incredible.
Well, so in the later stages of February, there he missed 2 games, and I think that hurt his ranking a little bit. Plus, the game right before he got injured, he did not score a point. He only played 23 minutes in a blowout loss against the Knicks. So he kind of had a good, solid week stretch there where he wasn't great, and I think that hurt him a little bit. And a lot of people dropped him like, "Oh, this guy's trash," and they weren't smart enough to look back at the great production he was giving them for literally like 2 months before that. Now, I will say this, Herter's a guy, and Jeff Teague has been doing kind of a similar thing where it's like he'll play 3 or 4 games, he'll miss 1. He'll play 5 games, he'll miss 2. He'll play 10 games, and he misses 2 again. And that can be frustrating to own, especially on a player, right, that you're holding and you're thinking about dropping is because like, oh, God, he just didn't play again. Herter is a good steals guy. He's going to get you some assists. He's going to get you some rebounds. He's going to score 14, 15 points a game. He's going to hit plenty of three-pointers. He's a guy I really like. He's a guy I think should be a top 100 fantasy player for the rest of the season. He's got to stay healthy, and the Hawks got to just run him out there for 30 minutes a night, which they've been doing.
Yeah, I think that's a very actually, I think it's a very safe pickup for especially down the stretch here with the Hawks probably just looking to get some playing time for some of their guys out there and just kind of hey, they don't care if they're winning or losing. They're going to be just fine, but I think they want to see what their some of their young guys can give the what kind of effort they can give down the stretch, especially since these games aren't going to matter too much to them. When it comes to back-to-back streamings, Tyler, not a whole lot of back-to-back streamings this week, but there is the 2 games on Thursday that makes an interesting Tuesday-Thursday back-to-back. You got the Pacers, the Thunder, and the Blazers, who are all playing in one of those 2 games on Thursday, but they're also all playing on Tuesday. So and there's some pretty good waiver wire guys on those teams.
Yeah, right. When we're looking at it, Al-Farouq Aminu has been good all season, and he's kind of hit a little bit of a rough patch lately, but he's still a great streaming option. Mo Harkless has been playing really good over the last 5 games. He's getting a ton of steals, he's getting a ton of minutes, and we talk about this all the time, right? Mo Harkless' production is very much tied to his minutes played. Like, he's a very good permanent producer. So when he's getting big minutes, he gets a lot of production. That's been good. So when we talk about riding a hot hand, Mo Harkless seems like that kind of option. And then Wes Matthews starting on the Pacers. With Victor Oladipo out, they need someone who's going to shoot the ball a little bit. In his time in Indiana, he's averaging 14 points, 3 3-pointers made, and a steal per game. So, that's a great streaming option that's available in, 65% of leagues.
Yeah, that's a lot of leagues to be available in. I'm very surprised by that. And as I like to do later in the week, that's when I'm streaming. You got the Charlotte Hornets and the Washington Wizards Friday, Saturday, Hawks, Bucks Saturday, Sunday, along with the Timberwolves and Knicks and Suns, which we already talked about. Looking ahead, we always do a little look ahead to week 22, but that this is the playoffs. Like, if you are set in this week and you are looking good and you're gonna win your playoff matchup, and you can get an extra game in for next week's matchup, that honestly could be a deciding factor for your playoff run here.
Yeah, and I'll even admit to doing this in some matchups, right? Like, if I'm up 8-0 and I know there's 4 categories or 5 categories where, like, there's no chance this guy can catch me, I might even look on Sunday for a Monday, Tuesday back-to-back for next week.
It's a good idea. You might as well. Yeah, absolutely. If you don't even need the Sunday game, you're like, I don't even care. I'm going to pick up a guy who's not even playing Sunday so I can get 2 games extra next week. That's huge. Absolutely huge.
So you want to know the funniest part about the Monday, Tuesday back-to-back in week 22?
Let me hear it.
They are the 2 teams both playing 2 games this week. It is the Clippers and the Cavs.
All right. There you go. Well, the Clippers have some good streak. Actually, both those teams have some decent waiver wire players out there, so that actually could work out well for you.
Yeah, Cedi Osman. How hot has that guy been? He's still only owned in like 35 or 40% of leagues.
He's been on fire lately, and it's been a real surprise that more people haven't picked up the hot hand. And
Colin Sexton is still one of the best scorers on the waiver wire.
Yeah. If you need points like that, and hell, even if you don't need points, just see what happens. Like, you're going to get 2 good games out of him at the beginning of the week, and that could put you up in points, and that could change your entire outlook on how you stream next week.
And Patrick Beverley's not owned in that many leagues, and he's been great lately. So, for that being the Monday, Tuesday back-to-back, there are a plethora of options with only 2 teams. There are some teams like the Bucks. I mentioned the Bucks have probably the best schedule for the week. Literally, their best streamer is George Hill, who is number 1, a little bit banged up right now, and number 2, his biggest fantasy contribution over the last 30 days is he averages 1 steal per game. So they basically don't have anything to stream, and there are numerous teams like that. The Golden State Warriors are one. They just don't have anything to really offer on waiver wire players. Anyone who's worth owning is owned. So it's always good to see some of these teams like the Cavs, the Clippers, the Heat, with a bunch of guys where you can pick that guy up and be like, yeah, I'm actually going to get some good production here. I feel good about that.
Yeah, strangely, we always kind of get pissed off about the Heat not having any really, really good players that you can rely on. But in situations like this, that's the team you want to see because you can kind of pick out any of those guys to get an extra couple games. I will give a shout out to Tyler Johnson a guy who I might be taking I would recommend people taking a flyer on if he's available. Playing a lot more minutes in Phoenix now, and we know Tyler Johnson can be a relevant fantasy basketball player when he gets the minutes, and it looks like right now he is.
Yeah, Tyler Johnson has always been an interesting kind of stream target, right? Because especially in his time in Miami, you were always a little bit frustrated. Like he'd get minutes, he wouldn't get minutes, he would get minutes, he wouldn't get minutes. I will say this, for the last like 2 weeks, he's really struggling with his shot. But he is playing a lot more. You are right about that. Over the last 8 games, he is shooting 33.8% from the field.
That is not very good.
Which kept him off the list. But when you look at the other stats, and this is important, right? Because points are not everything. Over those same 8 games, he's averaging 1.4 3-pointers, 3.6 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 1.3 steals, and half a block.
Those are all pretty decent.
Numbers sound pretty good. And he's shooting 89.5% on his free throws, so he's not killing you there. Now he is killing you in field goal percentage, and his 9.8 points per game are not great. But you got to know what you're buying, and to get 3.5 rebounds and almost 4 assists with 1.3 steals and half a block sounds great. If he starts shooting better, obviously that's a great pickup. And here's another thing I'll do with some of these guys who are struggling with their shot. I will look at what their schedule is coming up. Like maybe they've got a few of those teams where they're giving up kind of everything. You can look at that and go, man, this doesn't seem that bad. This is seeming like a pretty good stream. Feeling pretty good about it. The Suns play the Bucks this week. Not great. They play the Knicks, and then they have a Saturday, Sunday back-to-back against Portland and Golden State. So seeming okay, not great. Obviously, you would like those Portland and Golden State games to be at home, and they're on the road. But the Knicks, the Blazers, and the Warriors have been known to give up a few points.
That is very true, and I think that is it for here for us at week 21. Guys, good luck out there. All you listeners, all our Patreon subscribers at patreon.com/watchingtheboxes who have been supporting us. Good luck to you as well in the playoffs here, unless you're playing me. And I'm pretty excited to see this. I'm not excited for the year to end because it's always kind of sad when the season's coming to a close. But I am excited to see how these playoffs turn out, not just in fantasy but in the real NBA too. I think it's gonna be a very, very good playoff season in the NBA. I'm excited to see what Giannis does. I'm actually doing next week. I will be in Toronto and I'm going to check out a Raptors game up in the north, see what's going on there. So hopefully if there's any Toronto listeners out there, know good places to eat, want to give me a shout out, you can find me at Watch the Boxes. I'd be happy to take any suggestions, feedback, or just have a drink up in Toronto. And Tyler, where can people find you on Twitter?
You can find me on Twitter at Tyler P. Watts.
You got any good articles coming out here, Tyler? You got anything to plug?
In the coming week or so, I will be having a kind of comprehensive mock draft. Looks at a lot of the players in the March Madness. That's going to be exciting because I know you're looking forward to reading that one and learning a little bit more about some of these draft prospects, which is always cool. It's always fun.
It's one of the few draft articles that I read.
And I disguise it as a mock draft because I know that's what people want. I mean, I do look at okay, this team kind of needs this team kind of needs that. But to me, more than anything, it's a list of players that I think are good and ones I think people are missing on, which, I mean, we all have different opinions on those players. And just like the real life draft, right? None of us bat 1,000%, right? I'm sometimes into a guy and he's not that good. And other times, I'm not into that guy and he is good, but that happens less frequently than you'd think. A lot of times I think I do pretty good on that. I don't know.
You have
the numbers.
You have a very good track record actually. And this year, not just with your draft picks, but I mean, obviously we all had Luka Doncic out there, but a lot of the predictions, a lot of the guys you were kind of putting your weight behind this previous preseason have been they've all been pretty good picks. So shout out to you, Tyler, having a very good fantasy basketball season. That is why you are in the playoffs in all of our listener leagues at this time. I don't know if you're going to make it in that second chance league, but
no, my strategy. See, now that slow draft messed me up a little bit, and I'm still a little salty about that league because two of the guys I drafted got hurt like almost immediately after I drafted them because the draft went on for like a week, which that stung. And then some of the guys I picked them like figuring, okay, well I'm going to need some home runs. Maybe I'll go for this guy, and that strategy has not worked out. The slow draft bit me in the butt on that one. I will say that.
Well, it got you, and I'm very happy about it because I'm doing very well in that league. We also had some weird finishes in some of the other leagues that we're doing. I was doing a 3-category experimental league with our friend Kyle and Alex. We'll talk about that in the future, but kind of a weird league where we only looked at 3 specific categories. And it ended up with 4 teams being the 4th place team being 5 games back. Kind of a weird to see the top player at 43-11. Like that's a weird number, right? Because you're either getting 3 wins or 0, so it's like you're not really gaining a ton. So those numbers seem very low, and it was a strange league. I don't know if I would recommend it, to be honest, but we'll look into that further once the season is winding down here. And I think that's it for tonight. If you guys like the show, please rate, review us, find us on Twitter, leave us feedback, and go check out patreon.com/watchingtheboxes. We'll see you next time.